Let's move on to our next speaker. Stuart Heggie will talk to us about astrophotography. Go ahead, Stuart.
All right, thanks, Paul. I hope everyone can hear me. My name's Stuart Heggie. I've probably met many people in the Toronto Centre over the years, but we've moved out to a farm outside the small town of Lucknow near Kincardine and Goderich. 100 acres, very dark skies, and makes it possible lots of astro imaging from here pretty well every clear night. So today I'm going to talk about two aspects of astrophotography, deep sky and skyscapes. I'm not an expert on planetary or solar system photography, but I'll do my best to talk a bit about deep sky and skyscapes. I'd also like to just give a shout out to the RASC's Astro Imaging Certificates, where I am currently the committee chair. We've gotten lots of submissions, super high quality, and like to see more. So hopefully this presentation will stimulate some people to pull a portfolio together and make an application. And I'd also like to give a shout out to the RASC's remote telescope in California, and I'm helping in that regard with the ops team. All right, so I'll just plow right in, and people yell if interrupt or whatever is appropriate if I stray. I'm going to try and cover how I got into the hobby, what kinds of astrophotography I do, the gear I use now, the software I use now. I'll talk a little bit about things I've used in the past to help people see a pathway to more fancy gear. I'll review a handful of recent images and talk a little bit about the challenges that I encountered doing each one. Maybe some more. I'll give some shout outs to resources on the internet that I relied on to learn the things I use, and another plug for the RASC programs I'm associated with. All right, so who am I and how did I fall into this trap? I got my undergrad in astrophysics at U of T. I won't tell you how long ago it was because I just feel old. I was an avid photographer since childhood, and so once I was in the workforce and had a bit of money, I was able to buy a telescope and merge the two passions. The first telescope I got was a Meade 2120 SCT. It's a 10-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain. It got replaced by the LX50, which was replaced by another one and another one and another one. And the other thing was an SPC 102, which is a Celestron 4-inch f9.8 on a Vixen Super Polaris mount. And that was actually the better rig of the two for my budding astrophotography career. I built my first observatory where I used to live in Flesherton in 2002. I built my second observatory here at the farm when we moved here in 2013. I built my third observatory next to the second observatory in 2015. I then went for counseling. I am currently the chair of the RASC Astro Imaging Committee, as I said, and on the ops and photography teams for the remote telescope in California. The picture on the left, a recent skyscape with Comet Neowise in the upper left. You can see my two observatories. The roll-off shed has my two imaging rigs. The 12-foot clamshell dome is for clients, and I host other imagers here off and on. And on the right is an actual, I think, film image from way back of the lagoon. So the gear I have right now is I have two rigs running, Planewave 12.5-inch CDK, corrected Dal Kirkham, with an Apogee U16M camera on the back, and that pair is on top of a Paramount ME, and I use an Astronom Mega Monster off-axis guider with an ST402 guider camera for guiding those photos. The Apogee camera is currently en route to Ireland for repair. The other rig, which I've been using extensively lately, is an Astrophysics AP155 EDF, so 6-inch refractor, a Moravian G4 camera, same chip as the U16M. They're on a Paramount MX, same guider camera, but on a piggyback achromat. And sometimes I will put field flattener on the back of the AP155 and swap my Nikon D810A and place of the Moravian G4, but I don't do it too often. But it is fun because in, you know, a couple of minutes you get pictures that take hours to get the hard way. I also have an Ioptron SkyGuider Pro for wide field and skyscape photography, where I use my Nikon D810A and a variety of wide field lenses from 8mm fisheye to 85mm f1.4. In the past, I'm going to share this just so people realize that you can use pretty clunky gear and still do really good astrophotography. So you don't have to have, you know, a mortgage to get into astrophotography. I had an Orion ED80 f7.5, a cute little scope. If you pick it up by the focuser, the telescope will fall off, so you have to be careful with that. I had a Vixen R200 SS, which is an f4 8-inch Newtonian, a Vixen VC200L, an 8-inch classical Cassegrain, a Takahashi FS102, f8 refractor, a GSO 8-inch Ritchie Chrétien, a TAC FSQ f5, and an Astrophysics 130 EDT. I've had all of those, they're all gone, but they all took photos for me and they did a great job. I've had 2 Vixen Super Polaris mounts, love them. I've had 3 G11s. I had a Vixen Super Polaris DX, which is kind of a collector's item. I've had an AP 900 QMD mount, sold that, replaced it with an AP 900 GTO, I've sold that. And cameras, I've used Nikon F2 film cameras. I started imaging CCD with an ST7E, then an ST10 XME, then 2 STL 11,000s, and now I have the 2 big cameras from Moravian and Apogee. Software I use for deep sky images, the SkyX for camera and mount control, and for image capture, I use CCD Commander for automated imaging so I can sleep. I use TeamViewer to communicate with the observatories from the house so I don't get insect bites. And I use PixInsight for image calibration, cleanup, and alignment, stacking, and assembling RGB, but I use Photoshop for blending H-alpha with RGB or luminance with RGB. And I use Photoshop for cleanup and preparing for web upload. And for the DSLR, I pretty much use Lightroom, but my camera does in-camera stacking. You can do up to 10 photos stacked, up to 15 minutes each. So it's pretty handy, and I don't have to do a lot of fooling around to get the photo ready for Lightroom. So I'm going to just show 7 photos, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each one and the challenges I faced. The first one, they'll all be pretty much recognizable. So the first one is M31. This is an LRGB. I was pretty happy with this one. The things that are challenging about mosaics, PixInsight makes mosaics way easier, but learning how to do them in PixInsight, not easy. Once you have the knack, it does a superb job, but it definitely, you have to do some homework. So getting this stitched together with no seams and no obvious transition was tricky. The thing I like most about this image is it's pretty deep. You can see a strong bridge between M110 and the main body of M31, which is, I think, a sign of a deep image. If you see black between those 2 galaxies, not so deep. Now this is a 2-frame mosaic of the Veil, parts of the Veil Nebula. It's a narrowband image. This was a brutal mosaic to try and assemble, and as all photographers know, I can see all the warts. I can tell you where the seams are. Hopefully you can't see them. But anyway, this one I was pleased with when it was done, but the goal was to get a 4-frame mosaic with the entire veil, which I managed to do eventually. This is a different processing approach, so the colors are different. Again, you know, I can see where the seams are, but I was pleased in the end with how this turned out. But it was worth the effort, but it was a lot of work. Now I'm going to show you the Swan Nebula, M17. This is an unusual framing because I have a large field of view with the refractor and the big chip Moravian camera. So I decided to put the M17 in the bottom corner so that I could get this much fainter nebula in the upper right. This is the H-alpha channel. This is the RGB channel. And now I'll show you what it looks like when you blend the H-alpha and RGB. So hopefully you can see a difference. There's the H-alpha now blended in. That's done in Photoshop using a blending mode called Lighten, which only adds the H-alpha where it's brighter than the RGB signal. Depending on my MacBook Pro, I can't see the difference between the two, but on this monitor, I see a strong difference. So hopefully you all saw that. This picture is an unusual nebula, NGC 1333. This is an LRGB image, very deep. I went, as you can see on the left panel, hopefully 2 hours in red, 3 hours in green, 2 hours in blue, and 510 minutes in luminance. Put all that together, and this is what popped out. But I'd also say that this same data set I shared with my friend Carrie Ann Lucky Hepburn, and she processed it. Hers looks, of course, she's a better processor than I am, so she did a nicer version, but it's similar looking to this, and she submitted it to APOD, and we won an APOD, one of many for her, my very first, so I was very excited by that. This one I just completed. This is called the Flying Bat, or the Bat, and this green thing in the middle is called the Squid. The Flying Bat is a classic H-alpha RGB kind of object. I think this is an LRGB image with H-alpha enhancement. I've got a typo there. But to get the Squid, you have to image in through an O3 filter. And it was unbelievably faint. It was only discovered something like 10 years ago. So here I have 24 times 10 minutes of red, and well, you can see on the left side. So 4 hours of red data, and 2.5 hours of green, almost 4 hours of blue, 5 hours of luminance, and 11 hours of H-alpha. So that got the red and the stars and all that, and then 15 hours of O3 to get the squid in the center to come out. And even at 15 hours stat, it was barely perceptible. It had to be stretched really hard, and at the end, it was pretty noisy, but you know, it goes in and the warts are somewhat hidden. But I would say this is one of the hardest images I've ever had to put together. It was very difficult to process, but I'm pleased with the result. Hopefully, hopefully people like it. This is also a classic. This is the Orion Nebula, of course. The challenge with these is, as people who've tried it know, the trapezium area of M42 is super bright, and in order to get all the faint wispy details in the outer extremities and not blow out the core, you have to image very short exposures for the core and build an image that really only does justice to the very brightest parts of the nebula, then do another very deep image where you know the core is going to get blown out, but you don't worry about that, and then you combine them in such a way in Photoshop that you can mask the core in one image so that the fainter one appears in place of the burned out part. But I was pleased with how this turned out. I think it's pretty smooth. Not a ton of H-alpha data because it is really bright in H-alpha, but the trick is, you know, finding an artful blending combination that retains color in the core, detail down to the trapezium, and a transition from the brightest areas to the dimmest areas that doesn't look, you know, overly artificial. And now on to Skyscapes. This is obviously Comet Neowise. This past year, we took our Ioptron Sky Guider out to Lake Huron at Point Clark, set up in a parking lot that was illuminated for apparently a Major League Sports event. It was impossible to see anything, but closed the eyepiece on the camera so the lights weren't shining into the back of the camera, set it up and set it for, I think, 10 by 2 minutes stacked in the camera, and I was lucky enough to get a bright meteor streak through one of the frames, and this was the result. So those Ioptron Sky Guider Pros, I think, are a super investment if you're interested in a tracker and you don't have one yet. I get paid nothing for saying that, so I'm sure there are other really good ones, but that's the one I have. These are pictures from our yard. So if you're curious about, is it dark really where I live? Yes, it's pretty dark here. This is on the front lawn looking at the road, and this is what I see normally. This is, again, taken with the SkyGuider Pro and a much wider, this is probably the 14 to 24 millimeter lens. And that's Jupiter and Saturn, I think, on the left. Another shot from the yard, taken at another time. Jupiter has now moved to the right in the Milky Way. I think Saturn's out of the picture, trying to get Antares and the nebulosity around it to show. But I have to admit, from this latitude, that's you're really pushing the data pretty hard to get it to show up. But it's pretty rewarding, and you know, as compared to deep sky photography, this is a whole lot of fun and reward for relatively modest effort. So totally encourage people to get into this kind of shooting if they're interested in astrophotography. This is from the front yard again, looking straight up, 14 to 24 millimeter lens. The core, or the main part of the Milky Way going through Cygnus. Just a pretty picture again, but these are multiple images stacked at camera, so more than a snapshot, but not a whole lot more. Now I was trying to get arty, so I turned the lights on in our barn and set up so that I could see the barn in the shot and get the Milky Way above, and then I turned all the house lights on so that the foreground foliage would get illuminated. It looks very surreal in the photo. I guess the greenery is not quite that green, but that's how it came out in the photo. So I was pleased with this, but it was having some fun. And again, I would say, you know, for anyone who's interested in this kind of photography, this is a great way to start. Okay, so I promised I would get into resources, and I know there are many people who offer training in PixInsight, and I know some of them personally very, very well, and I definitely encourage you to explore those. But to be honest, when I first got introduced to PixInsight, there weren't a lot of resources available, and I found this website, Harry's Astro Shed, and he does amazing video tutorials. They're free. You just go to his website, download them. He has a 2-part tutorial on processing M106 as an RGB and then LRGB, and at the end of that tutorial, you know 90+% of everything you'll use in PixInsight. It's really good. Now, for those mosaics in PixInsight, this tutorial on YouTube by Steve Allen was a lifesaver. There are some very quirky qualities of PixInsight's mosaicing feature that if you know them, it does a superb job. If you don't know them, you will struggle and probably be unhappy. And then a friend online, Bob Franke, the person who wrote Excalibrator, which does G2V calibration for color correction. He does a number of video tutorials or PowerPoint tutorials for using Photoshop and narrowband imaging. His website is a superb resource. So definitely encourage people to go and visit that if you're looking for help with, especially with narrowband imaging. Okay, and I promised, I gave a shameless promotion, I'll do it again. The Astro imaging certificates come in 3 flavors: wide field, solar system, and deep sky. The web address is there. It's also readily visible on the RASC website. Totally encourage everyone to sign up for those. It's a good stimulation to get out and complete a portfolio for any one of the categories. A lot of fun, and the judges are very nice. I can attest to that. So if you need some help getting your pictures up to the standard that the certificate awardees get, we'll help you. And also on behalf of Jenna, who I think spoke last meeting, consider the subscription service for the data stream from the 16-inch Arcos in California. I help with the ops side of it. The data coming out of SRO, where the scope is top quality. Very nice. All right, and I don't know where we are in time. I have a feeling I got a little bit of time. I can show 3 more if you want to see them. The Wizard Nebula, the Pac-Man, and the Bubble, and this will go a little deeper into blending a narrowband with RGB or LRGB. So I'll just go quick. This is the Wizard Nebula in LRGB, and it's I think I was plenty happy with this, but at the same time, it's a very strong H-alpha source, so I added this H-alpha data to it and then put them together, and you can see a lot more of the reds come out. The nuances and the distinction between deep red and pinks become more apparent. So I think, you know, if you have a monochrome camera and an H-alpha filter, don't be afraid to use it, and, you know, ask for help from various sources to learn how to blend them. This is the Pac-Man. This is straight RGB of the Pac-Man. This is just before my camera failed, so you can see some streaks off of all the stars, like they're crying. That's my shutter malfunctioning. Here's the H-alpha data, and here it is blended together. Now this is a little more subtle, but the idea here is there is more red in the region around the Pac-Man. The lines between where the Pac-Man is and isn't become blurred a bit because the H-alpha extends farther from the main part of the nebula than just the RGB reveals. But again, you know, the star colors survive the blending if you do it in Photoshop or carefully in PixInsight. And then lastly, this is an interesting project, also very hard. This is an RGB image of the Bubble Nebula and M52 and a host of other deep sky objects. I was plenty happy with this, but then I thought, well, you know, there's a lot of narrowband signal here, so I added H-alpha to it, and the reds start to pop. It gets a little more busy, harder to see some things, easier to see other things. But I also have a sulfur filter and an oxygen filter, so this is what it looks like in pure narrowband. And now it's even harder to find some of the familiar objects, and all kinds of things you didn't notice before are taking center stage. And of course, with all that data, why not put it all together? So here is the narrowband image with an overlay of the RGB data. And now the star colors are back to being natural, and the narrowband features of the nebulae are more visible. So that's kind of what the progression from RGB to full-on narrowband to full-on narrowband plus RGB looks like. And I think that's it. All right. So back to questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Stuart, for a great presentation, especially for taking us through the progression of equipment, what you went through, and then what you settled on, and also the software that you use. Very interesting, and of course, fabulous images, completely outstanding. Very well done.
Thank you.
Let's go to Emma with some questions.
We've got a few questions for you here. First question comes in from Ennio. Any thoughts on Nikon versus Canon?
Yes, I have strong thoughts on that question. That question drives me crazy. I will say both cameras are smarter than I am, and I think you should pick the one that is more intuitive for you. When I picked up a Nikon, I instantly felt, wow, I totally get this. When my wife was shopping for her first DSLR, I said, get a Canon camera. I'm brand agnostic, but when I pick up a Canon, I have to struggle harder to remember where everything is and where all the buttons are. I can run my Nikons blindfolded in the dark and not think twice. So I'm used to them. I like them. The glass is excellent in both camps. I would say pick the one where you feel a bond with the camera, and use that one. And of course, Canon has made many Astro-friendly cameras, and their newest one is superb. The D810A is an excellent Astro camera from Nikon, but I would say buy the one that you feel most comfortable with. Okay.
Thanks. Next question comes in from Blake. When you were a kid shooting photos, did you do your own film processing?
When I was doing my own film processing in university, not when I was a kid. So black and white mostly. I had an enlarger, all the kit, and had a lot of fun doing that kind of stuff. A lot of fun. I would, if I was to do it over again, I would definitely do that again. But I've gotten over it, so I don't do it anymore.
Reza wants to know, can you recommend locations for capturing the Milky Way and galactic core in southern Ontario?
Well, as I said earlier, you know, being on the lakeshore is brilliant for southern targets, and you'll want a low southern horizon with no light in that direction. So I would say get down to Lake Ontario shorelines for Milky Way shots, especially of the center of the Milky Way, Sagittarius and Scorpius. Anywhere else in the Milky Way, overhead, Orion, things like that, just get somewhere dark. And you know, Orion's plenty high enough. You don't have to worry about being having a low horizon, but you definitely need to be somewhere dark.
Are CMOS cameras available for astroimaging, and do they offer any advantages over CCD cameras?
There are lots of CMOS cameras for astroimaging, and CCD cameras are on the way out anyway. So if you were to buy a new Astro camera, you probably should be looking at CMOS cameras. These 1600 and 2600 cameras from who is it? QHY, ASI. I can never remember who it is, but they're much lower noise, and they have a huge advantage over CCD in that regard. Flat fielding of CMOS cameras, there's some controversy from super experts that it is harder to do. The chips don't behave quite as properly as the CCDs did. But you know, the reality is I see all kinds of images from CMOS cameras that are superb, and I don't think you should worry about that. But if I were to buy a new camera today, I would probably be shopping for a CMOS camera because CCDs are on the way out. Thank
you. Steve wants to know if you have any comments on Dahl-Kirkham versus Schmidt-Cassegrain for astrophotography.
Uh-oh, I'm going to get in trouble. So I have like a serious, I don't want to say I have a hate on for Schmidt-Cassegrains, but I'm not really fussy on Schmidt-Cassegrains. The Dahl-Kirkham, I'll quote Peter Saravolo, who manufactured corrected Dahl-Kirkhams, and he's an optical design genius. He said in some interview that the corrected Dahl-Kirkham was the best astrograph design, period. So I'll bow to him. He knows his stuff. I'm a big fan of astrophysics gear. They make all kinds of crazy telescopes. I love refractors, but if I had to answer between Schmidt-Cassegrain and Dahl-Kirkham, I would say hands down Dahl-Kirkham. Now, if you're talking about the RASA, the Roe Ackerman version, those to me aren't really Schmidt-Cassegrains, but those produce superb images. But they're very expensive too, so there's no cheap way to get big glass or big mirrors into the astrophotography game. But yeah, Dahl-Kirkham over classical Schmidt-Cassegrains, and the Roe Ackerman version, very good as well.
Okay, this is our last question. What is your favorite picture or your favorite thing that you've photographed so far?
Ooh, well, I'm a sucker for the really famous objects. I love photographing M42. I love photographing M31. I've had some crazy experiences where I take a picture that's like big shrug, and then I get contacted by a professional astronomer saying, oh, like one instance, the Beehive cluster. It was an okay photo. Then I get contacted, and this guy says, oh, I discovered 2 exoplanets in the Beehive cluster, and I need a photo for a local kid did good in my hometown paper. Can we use it? I was, yeah, sure. And then he calls back 2 weeks later and says, NASA wants to use your photo now. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. When I had a very nice film photo of Venus, Mars, and the crescent moon, and I got a call from the University of Nevada, and they were in charge of the public outreach for the one of the Mars orbiters, and they wanted to do public outreach, and they wanted to use my photo at the start for, you know, since the dawn of time, people have looked up at the night sky and marveled at the movement of the planets. And so I was like, it's not an amazing photo, but I was thrilled that it got used that way. And then the last one was a third quarter crescent moon shot, and I got contacted by the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, and they wanted to use it for the Messenger spacecraft outreach, where they said, you know, the third quarter moon looks just like Mercury. Most people can't tell the difference if we put them on the same, at the same size. So they used my photo and a messenger spacecraft photo for comparison, and then they had a little quiz where you had to guess which was which. So I printed that off and I put it on my wall in my office at work, and I said, look at that, look at the photo credits. Crescent Moon, Stuart Heggie, all other pictures by the messenger spacecraft. I said, look at that, I got first building over $1 billion spacecraft. So that one's near and dear for that reason.
Well, thank you. That's all the questions.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here.
Sure, just thought of a question myself. The Chinese made RC scopes like the GSO, are they any good for photography?
Well, I think so. When I was asked by KW Telescopes to use one of the first ones to take some pictures that they hung in their gallery to encourage people to use them. At the time, the focuser was messed up and it wouldn't square, and then they replaced it, and then it was fine. And then I said, well, you know, it's a very slow, so can I get a focal reducer? No, there isn't one. Well, now there's a focal reducer. So I think if you speed them up a bit with a focal reducer, I think they are really good. And I think Carrie Ann has one, and she does really good work with hers, of course. So I would say they're a great value. And the one I have on my website, a couple of pictures taken with one when they were just coming out, and I think they're great photos. But you know, don't put a monster chip on the back of one and without, you know, a lot of tuning of the spacing, and you probably need a flattener for that to work. But for most cameras, I think they would be great.
Okay, great. Thanks again, Stuart. Great presentation.
Thank you.